So the biggest thing that I has really transformed my understanding of myself is the 5 intensities or the 5 overexcitabilities. And this is from Dabrowski's research, and I touch on this in my TEDx talk to start, but reading through the research and the description of the 5 different types of intensity, I was like, oh my gosh, I check like every box on this. And I've always seen these as like problems, bad deficits about myself that I needed to change. And once I learned about how those intensities are just part of my wiring, I have finally seen them as strengths and really embraced my intensity.
Martians landed.
Yes.
Wearing Prada suits.
Yes.
Drinking Henry Seltzer.
Yes.
Chewing juicy fruit.
Yes, and?
Your branding here.
Yes, brand.
Your message here.
Yes, and?
A verse about
Yes.
your product here.
Yes.
I'm Hirsch Redmond.
Yes, and?
I'm a message therapist.
Yes.
And I have a podcast.
Yes, brand.
That's right, that's it.
Yes.
We'll help you fix the world.
Yes.
Or your bottom line.
All right.
Your bottom line.
Get it. I get it. Welcome to the Yes Brand Podcast.
Heading down the brand voice runway with me today is Meghan Bonde. Meghan is a neurodiversity specialist. She designs transformational learning experiences to develop top talent and accelerate business success. And to put that in a framework, in 1997, Apple Computer came up with a campaign called Think Different, and illustrating through geniuses of our history, like Albert Einstein, that thinking different is actually an advantage in business. And that's something that Meghan has learned about, discovered, and now shares with socially conscious corporations, helping them improve their bottom line in their business by exploring neurodiversity. So welcome, Meghan, to Brand Voice Runway.
Thanks so much for having me.
It is great to have you on the show. Let's start at the beginning, and whatever the beginning is for you, you have the floor and the luxury of starting there.
Awesome. So I started as an entrepreneur when I was about 9 years old and really ran like a school in the basement of my house with my friend across the street. And we would go knocking on doors and get people to sign up for our one-day caregiving camps. You know, get ready for the holidays. We'll take your kids for 5 hours and do activities, and you can go shopping and whatever. So we had 50 kids on our block. Parents loved it. They'd send them, we'd have crafts and snack and books and games and all kinds of fun stuff for the kids. So that was the beginning of my journey. I got my degree in college in psychology. I was interested in so many things and I couldn't decide what. And I ended up getting my master's in speech language pathology. And so I've really worked for several years in meeting the needs of kids who think differently and learn differently as an educational leader, really noticing that some of the kids who teachers might say, oh, they're really behind or they really struggle in this, actually have some amazing strengths. And maybe school just wasn't designed for them or set up for them. And so I learned to just love problem solving and figuring out how can we make adjustments in our school environments to, you know, really leverage the strengths of everybody. And my journey took me to a place where I discovered that my own kids were neurodivergent. And then I realized, they sound a lot like me. And I discovered I was neurodivergent and think differently. And I really realized that my workplace wasn't meeting my needs in the way that I needed to really thrive. And so that's been my mission ever since transitioning from public education into working with organizations is let's look at how do we meet the needs of diverse employees? How do we accelerate success using these diverse minds and top talent?
And it's interesting to me because I can almost see a lot of my listeners listening to this and nodding their heads yes as they hear about different ways to approach education, because so many of the guests that come on the show and a lot of the listeners are entrepreneurs. They think differently. They have come up with some different way of doing things, and that's why they've created 7 and 8 figure businesses and even bigger. And it's always about the road less traveled and not being afraid. But I have had more than one guest tell me stories about their struggles in school, and they got kicked out of school, or they didn't do well, or they never did that, or they never pursued an advanced degree because they struggle so much with, so I think that this is an especially interesting topic for this audience. The other thing that's really interesting is I literally was on a phone call an hour ago with a coach who recently discovered, maybe 5-6 years ago, that she's neurodivergent, that she is on the spectrum, and had little hints here and there, but it hadn't really affected her career. It had, but it really opened up her world to recognize it. So share a little bit about that experience as an adult and with your kids, and maybe what their ages are or were when you discovered this.
Yeah, so currently my kids are 8 and 10. And how we first figured out there were some differences was the universal screening that the school does for gifted education, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And what we learned was that giftedness is way more complex than just, oh, they need some extra challenge or advanced learning in certain areas. It comes with a lot of differences in terms of social emotional development, sensory needs, things like that. So then when the kindergarten teacher noticed the same characteristics in my son, we went ahead and did some of the identification process as well, and continue to learn about their brains and their different strengths and needs as they're growing up. And so before I wanted to dive deeper into the identification process with them, I decided I wanted to experience it for myself, because I believe in leadership as being a role model and doing something first. And I wanted to see, how is this going to go? What's it going to be like? Let me learn about my own brain and show them that if somebody tells you, oh, you're wired differently, or labels you with something, that's not a bad thing. That's just learning about yourself, and you're not broken. We don't need to fix you. And I'm going to go through the process alongside you. So,
yeah. And and this is also, music to my ears, the idea that when my kids were younger, and one of my kids is neurodivergent as well, and it was this struggle to get them at 7 years old, 6 years old and earlier, all the way up till 7, when they were finally diagnosed, and that was kind of like a relief. But at the same time, this idea of, get in line, get the pencils really fast, pick up, do everything just exactly as indicated for everybody. And it just seems like it's such a missed opportunity. At the same time, everything that we accomplish in some way relies on systems, right? So what's the happy medium between conformity or systems and individuality and freedom of thought?
So I really take a universal design approach. And when we think about universal design, one story to kind of explain it is a while ago in the Air Force, planes were made where just a certain body size fit. And so only certain bodies could be pilots.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, we need to figure out a way to have planes for, people of different heights and sizes and longer torsos and longer legs and all of these different things. And people said, it can't be done. we're going to have to make separate individualized planes for every single pilot to make them fit. They have to be so fast and be able to respond. Well, that's how adjustable seats were invented, in how our cars have seats that move forward and back and have different inclines. And it's a small tweak to make something adjustable. And so we can do the same things in our schools, in our corporations and organizations, where we have a general system and we have these ways that make it really adjustable so that everybody can be included and access the learning and really engaging in the work and thrive.
That's not surprising at all that you, because we hear a lot about limiting beliefs and a lot of things that are programmed into us. My sense is that, being a parent, I understand that we're always trying to protect our kids from something. And we learn that we grow up thinking we have to protect ourselves from something. And that's what our id does, and kind of protects us from all of these dangers, like, oh my gosh, we're going to have to build a million different planes for a million different body types, but that's kind of one of the tricks that our brain plays on us. When we think about all these different gifts, you had put down somewhere, there was a list of identifications: gifted, twice exceptional, autistic, ADHD. Where are we now on the spectrum, no pun intended, of classification of neurodivergence?
Yeah, so it's definitely not super clear cut, but in general, neurodiversity is that everybody has different brains, everybody has different strengths and needs. Neurodivergent would be this umbrella term for all these different sort of cognitive profiles that are not falling into the neuronormative, typical ideal, is really what's been constructed. And really what the neurodiversity movement is saying is that there is no ideal brain. All of the brains are important, just like with biodiversity, and we need a wide variety of plants and animals to have a thriving ecosystem. The same thing is true for neurodiversity, needing all the different brains. So no matter what label or identification, or if there's multiple areas, if you are somebody who doesn't quite fall into the box of this neuronormative, typical ideal that's been constructed, then you can identify as neurodivergent, and you may decide to kind of pinpoint and narrow in to understand your profile better and give language to it and be able to find a tribe to understand yourself. And some people self-identify and some go get it, but like identification from professionals. But yeah, it covers a really wide range of labels that aren't considered neurotypical.
Yeah, and I've heard, some controversy around this adult diagnosis of ADHD, and I, in some way we're trying to classify uniqueness but and put a label on something that is, like, ultimately, the more individualistic we can be, the more we can kind of accept and rally behind our differences, the better off we'll be, the more tolerant we'll be of one another, the more there is a chance to grow. So the labels don't really matter in any sense other than to make the path easier to individuality. Well, let's talk about this now as a business, and in terms of how you have taken your expertise and connected with companies, clients. How did you bring this practice to your business?
Yeah, so one thing that I'm really excited about for getting the word out is my upcoming TEDx talk that's going to be released in the next couple months. And so I gave the talk mid-October this year to really have a platform to share about neurodiversity and my experience and this idea of really embracing the neurodivergent identity that you may have. because it is important to notice that neurodivergent people do have a different experience in going through life and aren't always included. And so to get this idea out on a stage like the TEDx stage and have that platform in a really concise message, it's like 7 minutes, right to the point, which is so hard for me because I could talk on and on and on for hours about this topic that I've been researching and training people on for years and have gone to conferences and books and all these different things. But that's a huge part of getting the idea out and just connecting with leaders to share through networking. Colorado, where I live, has the very first Neurodiversity Chamber of Commerce, specifically looking at hiring and retaining and leveraging the strengths of neurodivergent people in the workplace. So
that's amazing.
There's really a lot of exciting movement happening. Companies are establishing focus groups and leadership, and it's part of diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And the momentum is growing to really notice people with different brains and include them and leverage those strengths, and that they do have unique needs, and it's not that hard to meet them. We can make adjustments.
And is your role in this to kind of guide the transition that a company would make, for example, and they say, look, we don't know what to do. Here's what we do. How do you work with a client?
So oftentimes it's helpful to do my workshop on neurodiversity to just get that baseline understanding, common language, and be on the same page. And really, it should start at the top with the leaders who are really going to drive it throughout the organization. And in that workshop, they experience the types of instructional strategies that really you can integrate into meetings, into coaching, into professional learning, onboarding, all kinds of different systems throughout the company. Problems of change are problems of learning. And so when we learn and design learning to be adjustable, they're going to learn about the neurodiversity concepts, and they're also going to experience those instructional strategies that we use for kids who think differently to really leverage their strengths, hear their idea, give them the think time that they need, make sure that there's not one person dominating the conversation. And after that baseline is formed, then we can really dig deep into making the adjustments and doing the strategic planning and change management required to really infiltrate policy and systems that are going to leverage the strengths and retain this top talent, so that you're not having a revolving door of losing amazingly gifted and brilliant individuals, and really investing in them that is going to make an impact on profit, people, the environment, everything.
Yeah. And as this stuff gets integrated and as people are doing this more and more, what size organization do you typically work with?
It's a wide variety. I've worked with organizations that had like 10 people come to the initial workshop, and that was most of their employees. And then I've worked in organizations where there's 50,000 employees. And so it depends on how the organization wants to start. If they want to start with a department or with their top leaders, or if they're smaller and just want to bring everybody in and start to unpack this type of work, it can really be adapted and adjusted to any size.
Yeah, so it's all about flexibility. It's all about being imaginative and having an open mind. When you're putting your message out there, we talked about this a little before the interview, and you're going to be attending one of my message therapy workshops, which is going to be really fun, and exactly the type of thing that from my side of the equation, I always try to advocate for as much originality and individuality as possible. What are some of the challenges that you have come up against when, like we're talking so far about people that want to do it, people that are eager. What have you come up against in this journey?
So really people uncomfortable with the labeling or language of just even acknowledging that there's neurodivergent and neurotypical. Doesn't this divide us? Doesn't this create more conflict and create sort of an othering effect, like you over there, othered or different? And what's really exciting is that that got brought up in one of my workshops because people are feeling safe enough and the norms have been set that we want diverse opinions. We want people to have disagreements or question things. And that's how this work is done in a deep way, is creating that type of environment. And I may have an opinion that it was really important for me to understand my neurodivergence. And it's important to not sort of erase it as that doesn't exist and we need to just not see it at all. It's important to me to notice it and pay attention to it and to say, just because someone has a label or a different brain doesn't make them better or worse than anybody else. And it's okay to have language for it. And if somebody disagrees with me, and people have in workshops, I encourage that. That's how we have dialogue, to be able to, work through, learn from each other. And we don't have to agree on everything.
Yeah. The acceptance of other languages is like almost the first step. We have to accept that there are other languages in society, social languages. So I wanted to circle it back around to your experience. What made you, in looking at your kids and having them, tested for neurodiversity, what did you see in yourself that you had not seen before?
So the biggest thing that has really transformed my understanding of myself is the 5 intensities, or the 5 overexcitabilities. And this is from Dabrowski's research, and I touch on this in my TEDx talk to start, but reading through the research and the description of the 5 different types of intensity, I was like, oh my gosh, I check like every box on this. And I've always seen these as like problems, bad deficits about myself that I needed to change. And once I learned about how those intensities are just part of my wiring, I have finally seen them as strengths and really embraced my intensity.
And that is exactly at the heart of your entire endeavor, right? They're not look at diversity as strength. Mm-hmm. There's strength in diversity. What are a couple of those intensities as an example?
Yeah, so psychomotor intensity is people who need to move their body a lot, who also talk a lot. I talk quickly and for long periods of time. And I need to be busy all of the time. I'm kind of like a go person. And it's led me to a path to have to learn how to take breaks and rest and structure that in for myself in a way that works for me. But it's not my natural wiring. And so I have a psychomotor intensity where I just kind of go. And I need to move in meetings and in trainings and just have a lot of adventure and excitement and variety. Another one I have is the sensory intensity, where certain things give me a lot of joy and pleasure when it comes to my different senses. And then other things are really disgusting, uncomfortable. Even now looking back and be like, oh, that's why this was so upsetting to me as a kid. I have this thing where I am totally grossed out by like whipped cream and pie in the face and like Nickelodeon slime. Yeah. It was like horrible. And then when we would go to like picnics growing up, and if they did like pie the teacher or something, it would be like so revolting and upsetting to me. I would have to leave. My whole body would be in pain. And then other things like I love music, I love art, I love to dance, and some of those visual sensory and auditory sensory, you have these things that are horrible for you, and then there's things that it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know many people that have such deep excitement and pleasure over this music and art that I love. So, or the lights that bug me, things like that. So that's sensory. I don't know. And my other one is my intellectual intensity, is that I have this insatiable need to continuously learn. I am constantly wanting to read and listen and go to conferences and about my area of interest. So you put me in a training about something that's not in my intellectual intensity wheelhouse, it's like I'm checking out. But you let me go in my area that I love, I go deep and constant learning. It's never enough. So those are some of my intensities that I have.
Yeah, but I can see where growing up and entering, the workforce and all that stuff, you would think of them as maybe just, quirks or likes or dislike, being particular, being focused on something, but that's great that we're now celebrating neurodiversity, and not only that, but taking full advantage of it. And so, Meghan, how can people find you if they want to find you and check you out, or maybe get in touch with a possible collaboration with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm launching a brand new podcast mini series that's just going to have a few episodes. It's on growtoptalent.com. And I'm going to share my top instructional strategies that are really effective and evidence-based. You'll be able to apply them right to a meeting or a professional learning type situation to be able to really accelerate success. So I'd love for them to go to growtoptalent.com and connect with me there.
All right.
If you liked the show,
Yes, and
it worked for you,
yes, then
subscribe and leave a
yes, friend.
5-star review.
Yes, friend.
Tell all your friends.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Get your branding here.
Yes, friend.
Did I make it clear?
Yes, friend.
Get your branding on
Yes.
before they're gone.
Yes.